free-to-play is tossed around a lot in the world of video games, but what exactly does it mean? When someone says a game is free-to-play, this doesn't actually mean the game is completely free. All it means is that you can start playing for free. Many of these games actually contain what is known as microtransactions, which allow people to spend money and get extra benefits. While nothing is inherently wrong with this, these systems are being abused and causing a huge amount of harm to both the game industry and its consumers. Games like Hearthstone, Guild Wars 2, and everyone's favorite, Hello Kitty Online, are examples of free-to-play games. But even if you've never heard of these, you've likely still played one. If you've ever touched Candy Crush or Clash of Clans on your phone, you've played a game that treats its customers worse than almost any other industry you can imagine. Free-to-play isn't inherently bad. Games like League of Legends and Counter-Strike have become two of the biggest games in the world using non-toxic business models. Right here is a picture of last year's World Championships for League of Legends, which pulled in over 10 million viewers. The problem with the current free-to-play system can be separated into two issues: how they ruin themselves and how they ruin their players' bank accounts. First off, how do these games destroy themselves? Well, to put it simply, the games contain two types of players. The first is the average player. They might spend a few dollars or they might spend nothing, but in total, they represent less than 10% of the game's total profits. The second type is what's known as a whale. These whales usually represent less than 1% of a game's player base, but over 90% of its income. These players spend literal hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to gain an advantage over the normal players. The way these games ruin themselves comes in the relationship between the two player groups. The companies make their games to appeal to the whales and get them to spend more, but this makes small purchases feel less and less satisfying, making normal players leave the game. Without normal players, the whales have nothing to be superior to and also quit. To counteract this, companies stretch their reach further and further, spending more and more money on advertising, trying to get to a player base that wouldn't normally access their game, until eventually the game becomes unviable due to the increased cost of marketing and ends up dying. The second problem is much simpler. It's how the games treat their players. These game companies hire professional psychiatrists just to study the best ways to get people addicted and thus spend more money on their games. The practices these games employ are basically identical to gambling in casinos.
There it is. Just open it straight up like that for you.
Yet they aren't treated like an addiction because it's just a game. The worst part? Many of these games are aimed at children who are especially gullible, getting them to steal their parents' credit cards and spend exorbitant amounts of money. When the conversation in an office changes from how can we make our game more fun for our players to how can we get the most money out of every individual player, don't you think something is wrong?